Hi, this is Dave from JavaCodeJunkie.com, and welcome to this, our 8th video in the Learn JavaFX series. In this video, we're going to be looking at the button class. So let's get right to it. Open up here Eclipse IDE, and we're going to create a new project, JavaFX. We're going to call it Button Explorer. Finish, and let's open up the main.java file. By default, a border pane is created for us, so we're going to just stick with that for now. Just make some space here. When we're creating a button, there are one of 3 different constructors that we can use. The first one is a no argument constructor, which I guess by definition doesn't take any arguments, so you can't directly put text on the button. You can't put a graphic icon on the button. You simply create the empty button, and you can subsequently add both text and a graphic in different methods that are available to you from the button class. The second constructor allows you to put text on the button. That is available directly through the constructor when the button is created. The third type of constructor will take as arguments both the text for the label on the button and a graphic icon on the button. So we're going to look at these one at a time. Let's get to the first one. So we'll create a new button. No argument constructor. Control-Shift-O to organize our imports, and we will pick the button control. So there we have a button. We now need to add that button to our scene graph, and the root of our scene graph, we're going to add that in a border pane, and we'll just put it in the center of the border pane for right now. Set center, and we'll just pass the button. And the default code fragment that was created for us already attaches or adds the root to the scene to the primary stage, and displays the primary stage. So we can simply run this right now. Let's give it a go. It's not very useful at this point. You have a little square or a rectangle, it looks like, in the middle of the screen, and it has no text, it has no graphic, so that is not very useful on its own. So let's see what we can do to make that button just a little more useful. We're going to set some text on the button, and we're going to say something like save. Let's run that again, and you'll see a button in the middle of the screen at this point, and it should have the text save right on it. So you can click it. It does not do anything at this point. And the other thing that we can do is we can create a graphic icon from a file that we have on our system, and we can add that then to the button. So I have one at this point that I've already created, and I'm just going to put that in the same level as the main application class file. There's a couple of step process to get the image loaded. First, we have to create a new image from the file that's available on disk, and then we have to pass that to another class called ImageView, and then we can add the image view to the button as the graphic. So let's have a look at that. So we've got a new image pass it the name of the file. So it's saved on disk as a PNG or portable network graphic file. Again, organize the imports. We'll include the JavaFX.scene.image class. Now that we have the image loaded, we can pass that through to an image view class. So let's create another variable. Once again, organize the imports. And then the last step is to add that graphic to the file. And there we go. And let's run that and see how it looks. We end up with a button that has both an icon and some text on it, and we can click on it. Still doesn't do anything of use because we haven't added any behavior or event handlers to the button class, and we'll get into that just a little bit in a minute, but we're going to cover the event handler in much more detail in subsequent videos. So let's close that one. So those are the basic things that you can do with a button. Now there are some other things that you can do. For example, we can add a button mnemonic to this button. Now, a button mnemonic allows us to use a shortcut keystroke combination like Alt and, say, for example, the letter S, and that will execute or click this button as though we had clicked it with our mouse. Mnemonic parsing for buttons is set on by default, so all we have to do to enable mnemonic parsing on our button is to include an underscore character in front of the letter that we want to use as the button mnemonic. So in this case, we're going to use the S, so I'll just put in the underscore character here, and you'll see when we run it, won't look any different. Still get the same thing, but if you hit the Alt key on your keyboard, you'll see that the button is underlined. Now if we click, still does nothing, but if we hit Alt again, then the underline disappears. But if we do Alt S, it'll be as though we clicked on the button itself. And again, there's no behavior attached to the button, so we don't see anything different, but we're going to get to it in a minute. Now, mnemonics are case insensitive, so upper or lowercase s does not matter. Let's add some behavior to the save button so that we can see that it's actually doing something both when we click on it with a mouse and when we use the mnemonic shortcut Alt S. So there's a convenience method in the button class called setOnAction that accepts an event handler of type actionEvent as a parameter. To show you this, I'm going to create an anonymous class. So it'll be new EventHandler actionEvent. And this is where we would add any statements that we want to have executed when the button is clicked. Once again, we'll organize the imports. And event handler is simply an interface that has one method. We need to add the unimplemented method at this point. And the unimplemented method is handle. A handle accepts an action event which is passed through to this function, this anonymous class. And within the bounds of this function is where we would actually put any behavior. So for the purposes of demonstration, I'm simply going to put a sysout so that we can have some text just quickly shown to us on the console. Now let's run that. So now when we click save, you should see down here in the Java console, save button was pressed. The same when we use Alt S, save button was pressed. So let's look at the second type of constructor, which accepts only the string text that's going to go on the button. So what we'll do is we'll just modify what we already have. I'm going to put the actual text for the button in the constructor, and for the time being I'm just going to comment out that second line. For this constructor we still have to add the image separately, so we'll just do it the same way that we did before. Now if we run that, we should get the exact same button with the icon and the text, and it should react the same way as before. So there's the button, we click on it, we use the accelerator key or the mnemonic. Oop, I'll just say button pressed, same as before. Now for the third and final type of constructor, the second variable in this third constructor for the button class is the iView variable that we just created a while back. Now at this point iView doesn't exist, so we're going to have to move a couple of lines up above, but I'm going to comment this one out because we're setting it in the constructor. We don't need a separate setting of the graphic. So we'll take those out of there, we'll put them above the button, and now everything is okay. I'll just clean this up, move it a little so it makes it easier to see. And again, now we're getting both the text on the button and the graphic or icon on the button in one constructor. So we don't need the two separate methods to set the text and to set the icon. So let's run that one and make sure that it reacts the same as before. So we have the same button as before. We can click with the mouse. Save button was pressed. And with the Alt key combination, Alt S, again, save button was pressed. So the button that we just saw was kind of small, and the text was kind of a little bit hard to read, so I'm going to show you how to change the font. So button dot set font. One we're going to use accepts the name of the full typeface and the size of the font. So we're going to say, for example, Arial, and we'll put it at size 24, let's say. And run that one. You'll see that the font should be bigger. It should be at 24 point. There you go. It's a little easier to see. So these things you can do just to make the buttons look as you want them at this point. So if the text on your buttons are too small, just make them a little bigger. And the next thing I'm going to show you is that all classes that are descendants of the node class are able to be rotated. So let's take a look at that. Set rotate, and accepts a double value. Now this is the 360 degree system that I guess you're all familiar with from your geometry courses. If you look at a two-dimensional, 0 is at 12 o'clock on an analog clock, 90 would be 3, 180 would be 6, 270 would be 9, and again 360 is the same as 0. So let's, for example, set it at 270. Give it a run and you'll see what happens to that one. The button should be pointing vertically up at this point. Still reacts the same to both the mouse click and the mnemonic shortcut. That's it for this tutorial. Join me in the next tutorial when we'll continue looking at the JavaFX controls, and we'll look at the label class. I do want to point out that we're going to cover styling of various controls in a separate video. And styling in JavaFX can be done through CSS or cascading style sheets. So we'll take a look at that in another video. Please join me next time when we'll take a look at the label class in JavaFX. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell to receive a notification when I post new videos. Be safe out there, and until next time, keep on coding.